So first I started out by tracing the template in order for me to understand it better, because the front part of the template for the Keyblade, like the top part where the flowers are, I had a hard time figuring out how to draw the base shape, so I tried to like draw that part of the pattern in order for me to understand it better, so I can cut out the base template and then add the flowers on top, because the way it was, I didn't want to add the flowers all in one chunk. I wanted it to be separate so it would give more of a 3D effect. And then once I was happy with the base pattern for the top part of the Keyblade, I cut it out with an X-Acto knife / box cutter just from my little paper pattern here, and I trace it onto 8mm AVA foam. I used 2 pieces and I glued them together, as you will see later on. Then I tried to piece together the main structure of the Keyblade, which is the handlebars. So I just used 2-part epoxy, which I absolutely hated, but I wanted to try it out, so I used that to put it all together. I continued using contact cement, which is my go-to method, but the 2-part epoxy was absolutely dreadful. I would not recommend it unless you know how to work with it. That was my first time ever doing that on camera, so I should have practiced with it, but I went back to contact cement. So I stuck it together and I put the other pipe into the bigger one. And here I'm just tracing my little paper patterns onto 8mm or 4mm AVA foam. You don't have to follow the exact way that I did it. I follow Tiffany Gordon cosplay, but you can use any thickness that you want. I just found that the 8mm AVA foam was better for my purposes. As you can see, I did have to tape some of it down, especially the tracing paper portions, because I forgot to trace some parts of the pattern. So I used tracing paper and some matrix tape to make the rest of my patterns, and I'm just tracing it and cutting it out of the EVA foam. So once I was finished tracing everything onto my EVA foam, I then began to cut it all out, making sure that I had a cutting board underneath. I should have purchased a bigger one because the one that I had was way too small for the surface area that I had to cover, but I made sure to be extra careful and not to cut my actual table during this process. So I just used a simple box cutter. I got it from Home Depot, and I'm just cutting the rest of the pattern. I believe this is the handle portion of it, and I make sure that I have all the right number of pieces this time, because the first time I did it, I did not have the right number. So if you're going to attempt to do this keyblade, to bake this keyblade, then you should make sure to have the right amount of pieces. Then I moved on to placing the handlebars for the keyblade and the vines just how I wanted it to before I glued it down, because I wanted to have a good idea of how it would look before it was permanently placed, because for contact cement it really sticks on really well once you wait for it to dry. So I wanted to make sure I had everything properly marked. I made sure to mark where I wanted it to go with a Sharpie. And I made sure that the vine portions could wrap around just as accurately as possible as the pattern was. I wanted to make sure the length of the vines was just right. Now the next step that I did was cutting out the pieces for the keychain itself. So I'm just cutting out the star part of the Paopu fruit shape. It's part of the keychain, and I cut out the leaves portion as well. And as you can see later on in this video, I actually cut out the stars, 2 pieces each, and then I kind of sandwiched them together using contact cement, which you'll see later on in the video, I believe. And here I am just fiddling with the 2 pieces, just making sure that it fits proportionally, because if it doesn't, I'm gonna have to work harder to sand it down with a Dremel. So I just wanted to make sure I cut everything as precisely as I could, because I'm gonna have to go back in with the X-Acto knife to try to make it proportional to each other. For what I did for that portion, to make it more seamless and to make them more of the same shape, I just used regular scissors to try to cut them to the shape that I wanted, and I repeated the same process with the leaves as well. The leaves I only did 1 piece each, I believe. I think I did 2. Yeah, I think I did 2 pieces each. Okay. It's been a while since I filmed this video, so I don't quite remember everything I did. And now for this portion, I wanted to use 2mm AVA foam for all of the smaller details of the Keyblade, such as the flowers, the other leaf portions, and I just used child scissors, as you can see. You could use any scissors that you want. These are just the scissors I had on hand, and they're small enough to cut all the details that I wanted. Because if I were to use the X-Acto knife, I would probably mess up the whole design, so that's why I opted for these types of scissors. For the contact cement, what you have to do in order to glue things together with this, you have to paint on the glue to whatever surface you want to stick together, and you have to let it dry for 15 minutes. I didn't want to film that portion because it would have taken too long and it's a bit tedious, so I just like kind of chilled for a bit, like, you know, watching some TV or something. I usually watch Bailey Sarian while I do these types of projects, or listen to an audiobook on Audible, so that's what I did while the contact cement was drying. So here I am in this clip, just gluing everything together, making sure that everything is aligned. For bigger projects such as this, you have to really take your time gluing it together, because once it's on, it's really stuck on there. So you have to really take your time and be careful that everything lines up, and if it doesn't line up exactly, it's best to take a Dremel or some sanding paper. For this project, I use a Dremel, and I use like a special drill bit with like a sandpaper on it, which will be shown later on in this video. After that, I let everything else dry, and I stuck it on to the Keyblade, as you can see here. I made sure all the pieces lined up together. The part that you can see me gluing on now, I actually did it wrong the first time. It wasn't aligned with the top part of the Keyblade, the other, like the handlebar, so I had to rip it off and do it all over again, which was extremely painful. But I had to do it because it just didn't align how I wanted it to. And for this part right here, I made sure to take my time in aligning the pieces together, so I won't have to do as much work sanding the sides later. So I just put those pieces together first, and then I attached them to the Keyblade. And for the vines as well, once I applied the contact cement and let it dry for 15 minutes, repeating the same process as before, I made sure to wrap it carefully around the handle. So once I was happy with all of the pieces, I realized that I have to Dremel it together. sorry, Dremel the pieces to make sure that they're all aligned with each other. This part was always difficult for me, and as you can see, I have a vacuum in between, so that way it can catch all of the foam particles that fly all over the place. And what's important when you're doing this as well, when you're using a Dremel, to wear gloves, wear junky clothing, preferably more covered up than I am in this video, to wear safety goggles, as well as a ventilator mask. All of these I purchased at Home Depot or Michaels. Like, this is where I got the Dremel, actually. I got it from Michaels. So in this portion, I'm just Dremeling the rest of my project together, making sure that it's all smooth. You can use sandpaper, but I felt like when I tried that method, just regular sandpaper, it wasn't really that great of a result, and I don't know, it was too tedious, and to be honest, the Dremel does a much better job. Just make sure you have all the right safety equipment before, and make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. I should have probably done this outside, but because I wanted it to look really good for the camera, I decided to just crack open a window, and I filmed this in my room. For this portion of the Keyblade, it's important to really take your time, as I was trying to do here. The video sped up, but I was really going super slow, and if I didn't edit this down, it would probably be like 3 hours of footage of me just Dremeling. So for the sake of time, I wanted to just speed it up a little bit just to show you quickly the process that I did. Right, so I forgot to mention that this portion of the clip is me having to rip off. You didn't see me rip it off, but I actually had to rip off what I had glued on with the contact cement because I forgot I had to Dremel it first before attaching it. Because if I were to leave it on like that, it would have been way too hard to Dremel like that. So yeah, so I had to rip it all off and Dremel it and then re-glue everything, wait for it to dry again, and then attach it like I am in this video. Either in this clip or the other clips that later on. So don't be like me, make sure you remember to Dremel your pieces separately before gluing them on. Because it was very painful to rip it off once I glued it on with contact cement. This is my first time attempting a Keyblade build, so of course mistakes are going to be made, and lots of mistakes were made during the building of this Keyblade, but we move on, we learn from our mistakes, and we keep going. So I think in this clip I'm reattaching everything to how I want it, and I had to like mark different spots because the other one, it had little bits of EVA foam stuck on it, so I couldn't really adhere it properly to that part, so I had to switch the Keyblade to make sure that I had a more clean surface, because if I were to use the previous spot that I originally mapped out for myself, I wouldn't be able to adhere it properly, and there would be like parts sticking out and the paint job wouldn't look as good, so I had to move it completely to another spot. So for the flowers portion of the Keyblade, I had to make sure to put the glue on every individual piece of the flower, including the little button, the little yellow area, like the center of the flower. I don't know what it's called, but I'll call it a button. And I had to wait for that to dry for 15 minutes before adhering it to the Keyblade. And as you can see, the first flower that I applied to the Keyblade, it's a little bit wonky and crooked, but that's okay. It adds a little bit of a cute charm, especially because it's my first time making it.